So, greetings of peace and solidarity to everyone. Since we're done about discussing the topic on a holistic understanding towards peace and violence, now let's move on to the lesson two, which talks about violence in human life. So the topic outline for this topic is first defining violence. So as a person or an individual or even an active volunteer or youth in the society or in your respective community, how would you define violence based on your observation, on your day by day interaction to other person or people or even the group? The second is the roots of violence. So, what are the common roots to consider that violence is existing in a certain community? Third is the forms and context of violence. So, what are the different forms and contexts? Next is the other types of violence, problems of violence, and what can be done to prevent violence. So, what are the steps, approaches to violence? So, what we are going to do or appropriate coping mechanism, strategies, or action to be taken or approach that we need to really um, resolve violence, lessons of experience. So, what knowledge we gain after we experience violence. The next is recommendation for action or recommendations for action. What do you mean by this? Ano yung mga steps na kailangan natin to really take an act to stop the war or even the violence? Then last one is the takeaway to violence. So there are a lot of person or even other institution or organization that tells there are takeaways about violence to consider so that in the near future we cannot experience it kasi alam naman natin na ayaw talaga natin ng violence. So before anything else, allow me to read you the intended learning outcome for this lesson. The lesson 2 aims to first discuss the meaning, sources, and types of violence. Second, discuss how violence has affected one's life in the community. So, paano nakakaapekto yung violence sa buhay ng isang tao, sa loob ng bahay, hanggang sa neighbor or even until to the community. Malalaman natin yung mga root causes, the grassroots causes. Then last, explain how individual and the community has addressed different issues or concerns brought about by violence. So ano yung mga paano nila in-address or what are the um, activities to consider to really address the concern about the violence. So next, here we go. The introduction or even the preliminary to be taken is this as an example of a study of World Health Organization according to their abstract or research all about the World Report on Violence and Health, World Health Organization on the Geneva. The abstract is this is the findings. Each year, over 1.6 million people worldwide lose their lives to violence. Imagine kung gaano kadami yun. 1.6 million worldwide at nangyayari siya kada taon. In other words, it is the idea of morbidity over mortality or vice versa, mortality over morbidity. Ano ba yun? Yung mortality is yun yung mga, if I'm not mistaken, namamatay at yung morbidity is yun yung mga pinapanganak. Violence is among the leading causes of death for people aged 15 to 44 years worldwide, accounting for 14% of death among males and 7% of death among females. So, have you noticed? Imagine 14% ang male na namamatay sa violence and 7% lang sa female. Why is that? Knowing the fact that the girls are defined by the society as too weak, irrational, emotional. Why is that 7% lang? Whereas 14% ang sa lalaki. Knowing the fact that they are strong, that they are the breadwinner, they are rational, or whatsoever. But why is it 14% of that? Because psychologically speaking, we know that males are very unexpressive to their emotion if they have their problems. Because society per se, yun yung sabi ko kanina, that they are strong, na baka pag umiyak sila, other might judge them that they are somehow not strong or even weak like a girl, that they can fight their problems. Maybe that is one of the possible reason why is it 14% of that's among males, whereas 7% that among females. For every person who dies as a result of violence, many more are injured and suffer from a range of physical, sexual, reproductive, and mental health problems. Moreover, violence places a massive burden on national economies, costing countries billions of US dollars each year in healthcare, law enforcement, and lost productivity. Siyempre, if the violence is existing in a particular community, there is a yon the interpretations of your poster, your drawings is there is a chaotic way or even bloody situation. In other words, um, the investors or even the business firms have this difficulty to really rise up, to really raise the employment rate in a specific community because of those problems that the place is very chaotic and unsafe, and the public is somehow thinking if they can survive in that day or even not, that even stepping out of the door every day they are afraid because of the situation of the existence of violence. And that may affect the national economies because it will ripple effect also to loss of productivity, or even the government will tend to somehow allocate higher budget for healthcare or even law enforcement. Look at COVID-19. We thought that there is decreased effects of violence, but according to some research, the domestic violence is really rampant during COVID-19. They think that we are safe at home, but definitely not. The issue on sextortion, cyberbullying, or other social media activities that are really malfunctioning our house or even our family is really rampant and during those days. And that definitely affect healthcare, lost productivity, and other aspects. So always ponder on this research created by the World Health Organization. Let's move forward. So defining violence. So according to Reardon, violence as humanly inflicted harm. It is succinct description of what constitute violence in contrast to other types of harm that result from natural causes. So in other words, according sa kanya, humanly inflicted harm. In other words, pag sinampal mo ang katabi mo or even sinuntok mo siya, that is considered already as violence because you inflicted already a harm to your partner or even your brother, sister, or other relationship that we may consider. On the other hand, WHO defines violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either result in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. So it is almost same to the definition of Reardon. It is intentional that may result to injury or even death, na kahit nasugatan mo lang ng, for example, cutter, that you may even slice a particular person, kahit maliit lang siya for as long as nag-cause you ng harm sa kanya, because you physically, intentionally use your physical force para lang masugatan siya kahit maliit and may lumabas na blood, that is already a violence. In other words, because you inflicted harm to that particular person. So next is, what are the roots of violence? There are four levels to consider that the existence of violence, and somehow different levels: the individual, the relationship, community, and societal. So at the individual level, the model examines the biological and personal history factors that increase the likelihood of an individual becoming a victim or perpetrator of violence. Example of factors that can be measured include demographic characteristics such as age, education, income, psychological or personal disorders, substance abuse, and a history of behaving aggressively or experiencing abuse. In your workbook, may nakalagay dyan na abi- it is considered on the aspects of biological, the availability of firearms, the exposure to violence in mass media, and the political instability. This is almost same that individual levels. So what, you are even the perpetrators of your own self. So paano mo yun siya susolusyonan, yung sarili mo? Somehow it is, quite relative to the existence of the mental health issues or even mental health problems nowadays, that there are a lot of youth suffering depression or other, catastrophes or stress that may push them to really commit suicide nowadays, or even a simple reading in social media that can we see or seek other person. That's why it's not bad to have this self-talk about yourself, that kaya ko pa ba? Yakang-yaka ko ba to, or kayang-kaya ko ba? It's not bad. It's somehow, increasing your self-esteem within yourself on how you are going to, soar past those problems as an individual. Na pag kinausap mo yung sarili mo sa salamin, automatic baliw ka na ba? No. Somehow, we need to have self-talk to ourselves, that we need to understand a certain situation, that sometimes we need to talk to ourselves looking at the mirror every morning, that thanks God I'm still alive and I can even fight all the grievances or fears across me on that day, or even somehow seek support to your, trustworthy friends, or even a circle of friends that you are comfortable with sharing your problems. That is individual level, or your, on how you are going to counter the violence within yourself, defining your inner peace. At the relationship level, the model explores how relationship with families, friends, intimate partners, and peers influence violent behavior by taking into account such factors as harsh physical punishment of children, lack of affection and bonding, family dysfunction associating with delinquent peers, and marital or parental conflict. It is, relationship level on, it is usually happening in an intimate partner. If a particular spouse may not agree to really do this kind of action or having intercourse to each other, and one of those um, person will not one of them might not ready for that, and then definitely other person is prepared and ayaw niya to conduct it, then definitely it will push to that person to really hurt the particular person or yung partner niya to really give what he or she wanted to do. Always consider, specifically the girls, that you have the most autonomy to your body. If you are financially or physically, mentally prepared to really do that action as an intimate partner, then it's about the time that you may have this kind of um, action to have this intercourse or exchange of fluids to consider. And the other aspects as a father or even a son or a daughter or offspring to your parents, what you're going to do na minsan na yung mga papa natin or even our mothers na masyadong mapanakit sa pagdidisiplina na kung makapagpalo or whatsoever, titignan natin ang sitwasyon na it will really put bad discipline on us or even harm on us. As a person, we need to, evaluate ourselves kung bakit tayo ginawa ng ganon. To really put ba a harm or discipline? Because somehow, if we put harm, it may cause damage in our cells that may affect the development of ourselves. But if we'll put us to discipline that for our personal development, then that's nothing wrong with that. That is the main purpose. So on the aspects of family dysfunction, this is some more on concerns on the aspects of child labor, that bakit child labor is existing in the society. Na pag si mama or si papa is irresponsible, mother is not performing her duty inside the house, or even the father is not fulfilling his duty and producing goods and services to your family, then definitely the child will go out. Specifically, that child is not able to produce within him or herself on how to survive in a particular situation. Then definitely that child will go out to the community, will, collect behavior or even see the other person and how they may able to survive, that's may cause them to really cause harm to other. That's why nag-exist ang mga riots or even other delinquent activities in a society because of the family dysfunction. Always remember that family is the basic social unit in the society. In other words, if that basic will broke or will break or really destroy the pattern of normal flow of our society, then definitely the whole institution will be affected, including the education, the government, or other aspects. At the community level, which social relationships occur such as schools, workplaces, and neighborhoods, and seeks to identify the characteristics of these settings that increase the risk for violence. For example, poverty, high population density, high levels of residential mobility, low social capital, or the existence of a local drug trade. Yun yung sabi ko na kanina sa relationship. Because if one particular person is really well disciplined or even well personality inside the house, then definitely it will reflect to the community because the family really mold their offspring well or even their children well on how they are going to communicate, interact, coordinate, or socialize day by day to other person based on their daily actions. Kahit sa eskwelahan pa yan, kahit sa trabaho pa yan, or even in your neighborhoods, makikita yan ng ibang tao kung paano pinalaki ng parents nila yung mga anak nila ng maayos. Contrary to that, definitely, if particular situation or a family suffering poverty or even other problems, then definitely it will a factor to determine what kind of personality or characteristic children have because of poverty. And that may affect to them to really same level in the near future. It is really existing on the issue of the existence of a local drug trade. always remember that if there's mobility of prohibited drugs in a particular community, there is no peace or even violence will not be eradicated in that situation. Because again, illegal or prohibited drugs really blocks the peace and development. That's why during last administration, the PRRD is really, promoting the AJK or the war on drugs. But again, there are somehow that it is also a causes of pure violence because ang tinitira ng mga kapulisan is the poorest of the poor, that they are really, the product of these social injustices in our country. At sabi naman ni Bato, dapat daw unahin yung mga maliliit. Dahil kung hindi daw sila uunahin, then definitely mahirap daw i-determine yung mga malalaking isda sa mga nasa droga. And that will really affects as a whole system na mas mabuting unahin daw yung mga pawns na patayin kaysa yung mga leaders. Whereas consider the victims is poorest of the poor. Hindi naman nila kasalanan na gusto nilang magbenta ng droga because they are even relatively deprived to the services or opportunities, resources given by the government, disdain to government to be given to them. In other words, because of their situation, specifically they are at the extreme poverty level, extreme starvation, or other problems of structural violence that may push them to really join on that situation to really, sell prohibited drugs in order for them to survive in a certain situation. In that sense, because of that situation, that pushed them to really exist or join on the existence of local drug trade. Kaya somehow, it is questionable pa din ngayon ang issue on extrajudicial killing or even on the war on drugs. Moreover, nilakihan pa ang porsyento ng sweldo or salary rate ng mga police officers. That's why they are very eager to kill other person in order for them to be promoted in a certain situation. Kahit naman ng iba dyan is implanted lang talaga. In that situation, that may really push them to be promoted and will increase their salary or even the power of vulnerability in a certain community. Their rank from sergeant to colonel to whatsoever in that situation. It is an explanation at the community level. That's why, PNP or that government agency may not, somehow issue on commission of human rights because of their certain killings. Pati yung report nila minsan wala talagang kwenta, whether we like it or not. That's why we cannot totally, build trust to them or build trust to them as a public or even a certain individual because they have their own biases. Knowing the fact that they are the government and they are tend to protect the community, that we are the PNP and we are the kakampi. And definitely look at the levels on the lambayong what happened. Without any relevant information na nakuha lang nila sa mga kuro-kuro o sa mga ibang tao that they are, these three kids are, somehow part of this extremist group na may nagsabi lang sa kanila na report, then definitely without, proper investigation if the three kids are really the victims of or group or member of extremist group, then definitely pinatay nila. So nasaan ang justice ng hashtag PNP kakampi mo knowing the fact that they are the government and they are tend to protect us as an individual or even civilian living in the Philippines? Some sort of apocalypse concerning about the violence or the risk for violence. So, at the societal level, social norms that create a climate in which violence is encouraged or inhibited. It also takes into account the health, economic, educational, and social policies that maintain economic or social inequalities between groups in society. Na pag sinabing, yes, biologically speaking, or even other um, some sort of biblical reasoning that the main purpose is created by the only created by omnipotent creator is boys and girls, but definitely the climate change or even the norms of the society change from time to time, considering that culture is changing or dynamics. Whereas other groups, becoming deviant or the existence of homosexuality or others aspects or the LGBTQIA plus community. In these aspects, we can also, somehow predict the situation on how we are going to, somehow affects that situation account to health or economic or educational or social policies that maintain economic or social inequalities between groups in society. That's why I am very, passionate or even manghang-mangha sa mga LGBTQIA plus taking up space in the society. So, what are the forms and contexts of violence? There are three. So in the workbook, it is almost the same. It is self-directed violence, collective violence, and interpersonal violence. So let's start with interpersonal violence. Violence inflicted by an individual or a small group of individuals include youth violence, violence between intimate partners, other forms of family violence such as abuse of children, and the elderly, rape and sexual assault by strangers, and violence and institutional settings such as schools, workplace, nursing homes, and prisons. Interpersonal violence covers a wide range of acts and behavior from physical, sexual, and psychological violence to deprivation and neglect. It is almost same that my explanation in the community or even in the individual level of roots causes of violence. In 2000, an estimated 520,000 people were killed as a result of interpersonal violence worldwide, a rate of 8.8 per 100-person population, 100,000 population. Many more suffered non-fatal and very often repeated acts of physical or sexual aggression or some sort of, macro aggression, yung insulting jokes that we may also hearing to other person na, ay ganito, gwapo sana pero bakla. Maganda sana pero tomboy. That is macroaggression. Insulting jokes. That they are joking but they are insulting other person. In my level, it is considered also as a violence. So suicide and self-harm or self-directed violence. Nasa workbook. In much of the world, suicide is stigmatized, condemned for religious or cultural reasons. And some countries, suicidal countries' behavior is a criminal offense punishable by law. Suicide is therefore a secretive act surrounded by taboo and may be unrecognized, misclassified, or deliberately hidden in official records of death to act as precipitating actors or triggers to suicide, such as factors include poverty, loss of loved ones, arguments with family or friends, a breakdown in relationships, and legal or work related problems. Somehow sad because other countries may not consider the existence of mental health problems nowadays. That even the issue on suicide is still as mentioned, they are stigmatizing because maybe because some sort of religious or cultural reasons or beliefs that they might consider na problems is really existing. Why is that just it is a part of life, and without problems we cannot somehow motivate it ourselves. But definitely might other person may not manage it well, and that may cause them to really commit suicide. But other countries, considering about religious or cultural reason, may not recognize or even unrecognized or misclassified. In And if there is a cases that may definitely hidden in official records of that. In other words, pag nagpakamatay ka, hindi yun na i-record. Because you committed it already. It is some sort part of goodbye, just it vanish from nothing. Well, definitely that triggers you na, number one, poverty, kahirapan. Loss of loved ones, kung namatay ang mama or papa mo, or even the parents na walan sila ng mabait na anak, masunurin, or even breakdown in relationship that somehow specifically yung mga lalaki or even babae na hindi madaling mag-move on in some sort of situation that may push them also to commit suicide, or even local or work related legal or work related problems. Yun bang binaboy ka, pinahiya ka ng katrabaho mo, na alam naman natin na yung nangyari sa'yo, if there is a certain situation na may video ka sa past na naka-move on ka doon at natuklasan yun ng katrabaho mo, tapos binalandra sa social media at nasira ang buong reputasyon mo at hindi ka nakapag-move on or hindi mo na kaya because there are other person na nagbubuli sa'yo doon, and that may push you to really commit suicide. That is self-directed violence or suicide and self-harm, wherein perpetrators and victim are at the same level or one individual only. In other words, there is a reason, but in contrary to that, other countries may not recognize that reason, but rather stigmatize. Moreover, predisposing risk factors include alcohol and drug or substance abuse, a history or physical or sexual abuse in childhood, and social isolation. Psychiatric problems such as depression and other mood disorders, schizophrenia, and a general sense of hopelessness also play a role. Rate of suicide have also been linked to economic recession and periods of high unemployment, social disintegration, political instability, and social collapse. Look at other person, specifically in a status of relationship, na pag hindi naka-move on sa isang partner because somehow there are other reasons to consider, di ba? Nakikita natin sa social media or even television na maglalasing ako, and then after that, paglasing na yung lalaki, magdadrive siya ng kotse na kahit lasing na siya, and that may cause to that particular person to go and somehow accident. And that situation, suicide na yun siya because of situation in relationship. Yun yung nag-push sa kanya para uminom. And because of that substance abuse, dahil hindi siya makamove on, pinush na pa rin yung sarili niya na mag-drive, then definitely na-aksidente siya, and that may commit, in that situation, namatay siya, then that is already considered, yes, it is somehow considered as accident, but as you may interpret the situation, it is already a suicide. Because there are other aspects also to consider. Bakit ba siya uminom? Kasi sir, hiniwalayan ako at hindi ako nakapag-move on. At it's hard to recover. Then definitely, somehow, issue on suicide. Other significant factors include physical illnesses, particularly those that are painful or disabling, having access to the means to kill oneself, most typically guns, medicine, and agricultural poisons. Yun yung mga ginagamit. Having made a previous suicide attempt, particularly in the first 6 months after the first attempt. Yung hindi ko na kaya, I cannot manage myself anymore because may reputation reputation ko ang nakataya dito, then definitely it will commit you hang yourself and goodbye, or even put a guns in your head, or even drink, um take prohibited drugs, ino-overdose mo yung sarili mo, that is already a suicide. Or using agricultural poisons, such as what? Muriatic acid, ininom mo, then definitely mamamatay ka. That may consider as self-directed violence. Next is collective violence. The instrumental use of violence by people who identify themselves as members of a group against another group or a set of individuals in order to achieve political, economic, or social objectives. It takes a variety of form, conflict within or between states, state perpetrated violence such as genocide, repression, and other abuses of human rights, terrorism, and organized violent crime. A collective violence, ito yung mention kanina, identify themselves as members of a group against because meron silang pinaglalaban, whether political, economic, or social. They have their own objectives na bakit tayo nabuo? Because we have this kind of some grievances to the government na dahil hindi nila binigay ng maayos yung opportunity, resources or benefits that are given to us, then we might created a group because we want to address this. And by doing violence, so we take action on that, then definitely the government will hear us. In that sense, we can create armed conflicts within or between the states, or even other genocide, repression, or abuses human rights. Terrorism like Marawi Siege, or organized violent crimes, yung magnakaw sa bangko, and other aspects. In other words, collective violence cannot be created by one person, but rather a group of people that are really aiming to address political, economic, or social objectives, or having social objectives. So factors that put states at risk for violent conflict include first, a lack of democratic processes and unequal access to power. Social inequality marked by grossly unequal distribution of and access to or resources. Control of valuable natural resources by a single group. Last, rapid demographic change that outstrips the capacity of the states to provide essential services and job opportunities. Ito yung mga pinaglalaban nila. Why is it they are, committing collective violence? Because the government is not really providing them it well. In that sense, because of doing so, the violence, the government may hear them and that totally address their problem. So what are the other types? There are two categories of violence, which is the organized and unorganized. And nasa workbook mismo. Organized violence refers to war that occurs between states or within a state. That's what I already explained it a while ago. Unorganized violence is usually done by an individual or groups, and a spontaneous includes wife battering, rape, child abuse, and street crime. It is created or even can do a particular person. Like nangyari sa Jensen before is merong babae na yung asawa niya is mapanakit, lasinggero, or whatsoever, really abusive. In a certain situation, merong nangyari na umuwi yung asawa niya na lasing and accidentally nataga ng babae ang asawa niya. And that may cause sa asawa niya na namatay. Then definitely, syempre, dinampot siya ng pulis at nanginginig siya because of that situation. Knowing the fact na kumuha ng psychiatrist ang mga pulis at inobserbahan siya mismo and napatunayan ng psychiatrist na that woman who committed that pagtataga sa sarili niyang asawa is really a product or a victim of wife battering. In other sense, because of that situation, hindi sinasadya yun ng babae. But because of, continuous na dati pa na ginagawa sa kanya yun ng asawa niya na ina-abuse siya, then definitely Hindi nakapagpigil yung babae sa sitwasyong yun na taga niyang asawa niya. And that girl is a victim of white battery dahil napatunayan ng psychiatrist yun na nag-observe sa kanya, nag-evaluate sa kanya. Or even rape, child abuse, and street crimes. Hindi naman kailangan na, yes, there are other concerns that knowing the physical force of a particular person na kahit bakla pa yan, it is most powerful than girls. Child abuse or street crime. Other is direct violence or physical violence, behavioral violence such as war, bullying, and domestic violence. Moreover, occurs when someone uses a part of their body or an object to control a person's actions. Fourth, indirect violence or structural violence, often unconscious. Structural violence results from unjust and inequitable social and economic structure and manifesting itself, for example, poverty and deprivation of all kinds. I already discussed a while ago. Sexual violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, spiritual violence, and ecological violence. Direct outcome. It is, connected to each other. I will focus on ecological violence, a direct outcome of human activity with intent or not that results in a diminishing of the potential for flourishing of both humans and all other creatures that inhabits a particular environment. Ito yung, that somehow I am not questioning na yung ibang relatives or parents ninyo na yung source of income nila is pagpuputol ng puno or legal logging that they have permits coming from the DNR. But my concern is that just sana pag nagputol sila ng puno ay mag-replant sila ng 10 puno para in the near future may gagamitin ang mga susunod na henerasyon. But definitely in the Philippine settings, baligtad ang nangyayari. Putol ng puno, walang itinatanim. Kaya during pag malakas ang ulan, there is an issue on flash floods, pagbaha. And then, pagbaha, definitely maaapektuhan ang nasa lungsod. O, nagkakaroon din ng mga pagbaha that may automatically some sort of paglikas because of that situation. At pag matagal ang benepisyo na ibibigay ng gobyerno, ang dami-dami na nating sinasabi. Like, ang tagal ng gobyerno magbigay ng benepisyo. Well, in fact, yung nag-conduct ang government ng environmental awareness training, seminars, tree planting, or other activities to really mitigate the issue on climate change or other environmental catastrophes, nasaan ka as a person? Wala kang ginawa. Then definitely you have no authority to claim other tawag nito hear your voice to voice out your concern about that situation because the government is really encouraging you to take part and action about environmental awareness pero wala kang ginawa. So cultural violence, verbal abuse or financial abuse or neglect. Cultural violence, some sort of on concerning about racism and sexism. Ethnocentrism is meaning it is your culture, a belief that your culture is superior to one another. Racism is yung you judge the person based on his skin color. Na dahil maputi ka, ikaw ang dominant, ikaw maitim ka, ikaw ang lower, ikaw ang inferior. As a white, I am the superior. And you are black, you are the inferior. You have the right to oppress. No. So what are the problems? Problems is families edging out of poverty and investing in schooling their sons and daughters can be ruined through the violent deaths or severe disability of the main breadwinner. Ito yung mali ng mga Filipino culture na kailangan mag-anak ng marami para in the near future, pag nakapagtapos yung anak, sila ang mag-aahon sa atin sa kahirapan. Okay naman yun, wala namang problema doon for as long as kayang i-produce ng mga parents natin ang mga needs natin sa pag-aaral natin because that is their responsibility. But knowing the fact that they can provide as well, specifically nahihirapan pa tayong kumain ng 3 beses sa isang araw, then definitely that mindset will be sana ay i-erase na yun sa utak ng mga Pilipino. Communities can be caught in poverty traps where pervasive violence deprivation form an unpleasant circle that restricts economic growth. For societies meeting the direct cause of health, criminal justice, and social welfare responses to violence diverts many billions of dollars from more constructive societal spending. Like yung nangyari sa Tacloban, nagkaroon ng Typhoon Yolanda. Maraming mga countries ang nag-donate sa Pilipinas but definitely ang pinatayong bahay sa mga biktima ng bagyo ay substandard. Na pag nag-earthquake, automatic mag-crack ang building and that may cause again another death. Sayang ang perang ginastos. In countries with high levels of violence, economic growth can be slowed down, obvious. People and collective security eroded and social development impeded. Of course, sino ba namang mga business firms or investor ang willing mag-invest sa country na merong war? Sino bang gustong tao ang magtatag ng business sa Syria, sa Persia, sa Iraq? In that situation, the much larger indirect cost of violence due to loss of productivity and loss of investments in education work together to slow economic development, increase socioeconomic inequality, and erode human and social capital. That is the main problem on workplaces. Na dahil sa sobrang dami ng tao at hindi na kayang i-produce ng government ang mga benefits in that particular situation, then definitely konti na lang yung loss of productivity because the benefits for the worker is not sufficient. What can be done to prevent violence? I will not read it because all of this is understandable. There are 5 reasons to consider. What can be done to prevent? So approaches, there are two, criminal justice approach and human rights approach. Ano yung criminal justice approach? Seeks its main task as enforcing law that prescribe violence and ensuring the justice is done. Kailangan mabigay ang hustisya sa biktima ng social injustices because if that particular social injustice will not be addressed to a particular person who are the victim, then definitely that may push him or her to really commit a violence dahil hindi nabigay ang katarungan sa kanya. Ano naman yung human rights approach? Based on the obligation of states to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights and therefore to prevent, eradicate, and punish the violators. It is somehow connected on the issue on COVID-19 vaccination. Yes, we have the right to express ourselves that we ayaw kong magpa-vaccine but again the government have the right to impose our rules for the benefit of everybody. That is human rights approach. So what are the lessons in experience? Violence often predictable and preventable. I will not go further on it because I already explained a while ago. Then second is upstream investments brings downstream result. It is more on economic approach. So third is political commitment to tackling violence is vital to the public health efforts. Last, resources should be focused on the most vulnerable sectors. Pag sinabing vulnerable sectors, meaning the most client that we need to really take an action in addressing social issues and concerns, specifically the resources, opportunities that might given to them. Hindi yung alam mo na nga sa sarili mo that you can provide but definitely sumausaw ka pa din sa benefits na yun because some sort na friend mo yung may-ari or friend mo yung purok chairperson, friend mo yung barangay kapitan, kaya nakaka-access ka. Knowing na alam mo na sa sarili mo na hindi ka nangangailangan ng benefits na yon at merong mas nangangailangan na tao doon. But because of some sort of political aspects, nakikisawsaw ka. So what are the recommendations for actions about violence? First, create, implement, and monitor a national action plan for violence prevention. That's why there are a lot of programs, activities, or projects to really address violence, enhance capacity for collecting data on violence, the issue on AGK, because not all the information given by the PNP is reliable, meaning data matters. Define priorities for and support research on the causes, consequences, cause, and prevention of violence, and other aspects. Those are the recommendations. So what are the takeaway to violence? According to Kofi Annan, violence cuts short the lives of millions of people across the world each year and damages the lives of millions more. It knows no boundaries of geography, race, age, or income. It strikes at children, young people, women, and the elderly. It finds its way into homes, schools, and the workplace. Men and women everywhere have the right to live and raise their children free from fear of violence. We must help them enjoy the right by making it clearly understood that violence is preventable and by working together to identify and address its underlying causes. In other words, it is just, we cannot eradicate violence, but violence is preventable because of conflict. Kung kaya namang solusyonan sa masusing pag-uusap, then definitely violence will not take place in a certain situation, whether it's from school, from workplaces, or from homes. But because some sort of, nadi-disorganize tayo, that may cause to us to really commit violence. Always remember that conflict is a positive approach, knowing that it is a product of social change. But some sort, if you are not, admitting to yourself that you're committing mistakes, then some sort of time you push yourself in a certain situation where you you want to revenge some sort creation of violence, where in fact kaya naman siyang pag-usapan. And I hope you learned something on my discussion. And if you have questions, comment on the YouTube, because I will going to upload it into YouTube. That may allow you to really access it anytime, and make sure to read it, because I will have quiz after the end of this lesson. So have a great day to each and every one of you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and ingat.